And welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. And on this podcast, we're going to start talking about public goods and common resources. Public goods and common resources. And actually, we're going to talk about how to identify what is a public good and what is a common resource. And we're going to identify types of goods with two questions. Question number one, is the good excludable? And question number two, is the good rivalrous? So let's just talk about these two ideas for a minute. When we talk about the question, is a good excludable, we're asking this question. We're saying, can non-payers, okay, people who don't pay for the good, can they be prevented from consuming the good once it is produced? Can they be prevented from consuming the good once it is produced? So we might think about it this way, or ask the question this way, and that is, can non-payers be prevented? We don't ask, are non-payers currently being prevented? The question is, could we prevent non-payers? So when we think about public schools, a lot of people would see this question and they would say, no, non-payers can't be prevented from consuming the good. Once a school is in session, anybody that lives in that community could walk in the school between the ages of 5 and 18 and get an education. But that's not the question. The question isn't do we currently exclude non-payers? In public schools, we do not currently exclude non-payers that live in the community. The question is, could we exclude them? Okay? Could we possibly exclude them? And the answer to that question is yes. We could just we could lock the doors, and we could say if you don't pay, then you don't get in the school. That's what private schools do. And so the answer to the question is, are schools excludable? The answer is yes. We currently don't exclude in public schools, but that's not the question. The question is, could we? And the answer is yes. And therefore, we would say that a public school is excludable. On the other hand, if we think about something like, a local television station that sends its signal out into the airwaves, they cannot exclude non-payers. Once they produce the good and they send their signal out into the airwaves, anybody who has an antenna can pick it up, and they can't exclude non-payers. So we'll talk more about some examples of this in a later video. But we would just say right now that the question is, could we exclude non-payers? If the answer is yes, we say the good is excludable. If the answer is no, then we say it's not excludable. And I'll show this to you on a chart here in a second. The second question is the good rivalrous? And rivalrous means, does one person's consumption of a good diminish the amount available to others? Okay, does it diminish the amount available to others? So the question here would be something like, let's just say for a moment air. Okay, let's say air. Okay, if I breathe more air, does it take away air from other people in the room? The answer is probably no, not to any significant degree. So we would say air in most places. Air is non-rivalrous. It is non-rivalrous. If I breathe more, it really doesn't take very much away from another person, maybe some trivial amount. So we say no, it's not rivalrous. But what if I said my car? Okay, my car, I would say yes, that is rivalrous. Okay, if I have my car, you don't. It reduces that car is no longer available to other people. And you could say, yeah, but other people, they have other cars. Yeah, but they don't have my car. So when we ask whether or not something's rivalrous, what we're really saying is, think about an individual unit of the good and say, if I have it, can somebody else also have it? And with the car, the answer is no. If I have my car, then other people do not have my car. And so, cars are rivalrous in consumption. Cars are rivalrous, in consumption. Okay, so that's the way we think about it. And oftentimes, I don't want to say this rule is always going to work, but oftentimes, like, if we can touch it, if we can hold it, it's probably rivalrous. If we can touch it and hold it, it's probably rivalrous. So cars would be rivalrous. We can touch them. Air, is not. We can't touch it. Okay? We can't touch it. All right. So the way that we want to then organize this is we're going to create this thing called a good matrix, and we're going to say, are goods rivalrous, are goods excludable? And the answers are either yes, the good is rivalrous, or no, the good is not rivalrous. Is the good excludable? Yes, it is, or no, it's not. And then we organize goods according to this. We define goods in terms of this. So if a good is yes, excludable, and yes, rivalrous, then we say that it is a private good. Okay, and we'll look at some examples of this. And then we would say, if a good is yes, excludable, but it is not rivalrous, then we call it a natural monopoly. Now, we will not be worrying about natural monopoly right now in this playlist. Okay, we're going to worry about the other two boxes, and that is when a good is not excludable. If a good is not excludable, but it is rivalrous, then we're going to call that a common resource. And we'll worry about that one on some future videos. The one we're going to worry about in the next few videos is going to be this last one, which is public goods. A public good is a good that is not excludable. It's not excludable, sorry. It's not excludable, and it's not rivalrous. Okay, the answer is no for both, and that is what we call a public good. Okay, so why is this all a problem? What's the big idea? Well, what we're going to focus on in this playlist is going to be these bottom two. Okay, whenever you have a good that is non-excludable, then that's going to either be a common resource or a public good, and that's what we're going to be worrying about on these videos. So here's the problem. When you have public goods and when you have common resources, which is like saying when you have goods that are non-excludable, the problem is that you're going to end up producing, if you allow the free market to take care of these goods, you're going to end up producing somewhere other than the social optimum. You're going to produce somewhere other than the social optimum. You're going to fail to produce at the social optimum, and so that's going to be the problem. Okay, so on some future videos here, we're going to talk about public goods, and we're going to talk about common resources, and we're going to talk about the problems that they create, and then we're going to develop some solutions to those problems. All right, this has been Mr. Hagan on another Econ Podcast. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you on the next podcast.